Well, he's been the executive assistant to someone people might call Willy Wonka himself, Mr. Mars, maker of M&M's, Milky Way, Snickers, Twix, Skittles. He's been a national correspondent for NBC's Today Show and the Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. He's logged 3 million miles in the air around the globe, and my guest today is Hugo Perez, and he is a person worth admiring. Hi everyone, my name is Doug Newton, and I'm the host of At the Intersection with Doug Newton. This is the place where scripture, culture, and character meet, and this is our new feature series called People Worth Admiring. You know, my weekly podcast, At the Intersection, is all about showing you how to develop your character to engage our culture with grace and fresh impact in your corner of the world. And I know no greater way to develop good character than the power of admiration. But who should you admire? You see, that's the question. So in this special series, I present you with some great options. People whose stories and comments will inspire you and shape your character because they are people worth admiring. Well, I'm so excited that you're here with us in this very first episode, this very first interview. I know that you're going to enjoy meeting Hugo, so what do you say? Let's get right to it. Well, as I said, it's a real pleasure to be able to be here today and to have a good friend, someone I've known for quite a while, Hugo Perez, with us. Hugo, it's good to have you here today.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Where are you today, by the way?
This is my home office, my creative den, where I find my daily inspiration for all the things that I do.
So you're actually in Chicago?
Surprisingly, I'm in Chicago this week. Yeah. I do quite a lot of traveling. I just got back from Colorado a night ago. I'm heading off to another trip in a couple of days. So here in the homestand in Chicago.
So you were in the States, but a lot of times you're overseas, I know.
Yeah, one of the joys of the job that I'm able to do is that I do get to travel overseas, which I enjoy. So I'll be heading to Asia later on in the year. I'll be in Europe in a few months as well. So it's just great to be able to see all the different areas of how the world is working and enjoying and developing.
And you've been doing this kind of travel for various roles and jobs that you've had for years and years and years, and you're not tired of it yet, huh?
I'm not tired of it. When I was a little boy, I remember talking with my mom, and I told her, one day when I grow up, I want the kind of job that I can get on planes and go somewhere. And lo and behold, God was paying attention to that and blessing in that area. And I've had a career where the vast majority of it has included lots of travel. I'm one of those guys. I'm a million miler. I've
Wow.
traveled almost 3 million miles around the world with my career. So it's been quite the blessing to see all that's happening all over the world.
Well, why don't we back up just a little bit and give me kind of a quick run through of the kind of things that you've done in the career and that's where it's brought you to this point.
Sure. So in essence, overall, the way I like to describe my career is I've been a storyteller my entire career. Ever since I mentioned as a little boy, I've always wanted to tell stories. I've always been one that likes to get into the details and be on the front lines. And so I was able to parlay that in my education and my studies and my endeavors to find a variety of different roles throughout my career that have all been focused on storytelling. So I started off as a journalist at NBC Network News. I worked for the Today Show and for the Tom Brokaw nightly newscast for many years, and switched over from the journalism side over to the marketing side, and have worked at both private sector and public, nonprofit and for-profit, everything from the American Heart Association to AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals to Mars, the candy company, where I like to tell people my boss is Willy Wonka because I work for Mr. Mars himself. And in more recent years, in a variety of marketing roles with private sector Currently, I'm the chief marketing officer at a plant-based food company that's based in Asia. So always telling stories, no matter where I have found myself in my career.
I mean, that is amazing. Of course, I've known some of those things about you over the years and always marvel at the kinds of things. And I know your tagline is actually a story cuts through all the noise. Is that how it goes?
That's exactly right. One of the things that I have learned and have has been reinforced in my life over and over is the best way to connect with a human being is to tell a good story,
Hmm.
and that works no matter what the setting you find yourself in. When you get down to the humanity, when you get down to, I just want to know you and engage. It's a good story. So I've focused a lot of my career and a lot of my life on how do I tell a good story because one of my motivators in life is just people. I just want to be engaged with people and make connections with people.
Yeah, and a lot of times when people think of storytellers, they think of somebody who's, sitting in a chair or on behind a platform on a stage, and they tell this long narrative. But when you talk about a story, you're not always just talking about some long, kind of narrative. It can be a story that's even pictorial or as graphical and everything, and because you're in social media now, so I'm sure that the whole storytelling concept has really changed in the years that you've been in your career.
Oh, for sure. I actually am in what's called omni-channel marketing. So I tell stories on all the channels. It doesn't matter. It's how do we connect? And so the concept of storytelling is what's the main core idea that you want to bring to life? How do you connect an emotional connection? How do you give the viewer, the listener, the audience an emotional connection? And then what's the medium that you're using it? So then I can do it visually. I can do it with written word. I can do it with audio. I can do it short, long, medium. It doesn't matter because it's about grabbing what I call the common thread. What's that through line that's going to really resonate? And then how do I bring that to life, no matter what the medium, the length, the time, the occasion, it doesn't matter.
It occurs to me, I didn't plan it this way, but having a storyteller par excellence as the first guest, the whole reason I'm doing these interviews is because I believe the stories of certain people that comes through just watching them live is one of the most important ways for shaping character. I mean, I know in my own life, and it's one of the themes really behind the kind of work I've been doing in character development is I don't think there's anything more powerful in shaping a person's character than looking at somebody, watching their life, kind of seeing that story of their life unfolding, and then kind of drawing inspiration from that. And in fact, you don't a lot of times even have to draw the inspiration. You get pulled, by that person's life and everything. That's honestly all the people that I'm asking to be on these interviews over the next several months are people that I have come to admire for those very reasons. I think let's just go back then in your life. Actually, let me tell you why I invited you here. Okay, and
Please.
from that character standpoint, I'm going to put up on the screen here 12 character traits that are fundamental to the kind of work that I've been doing in character as I've looked at people, watched them, live their lives, and particularly in a pastoral role, watching what kind of traits really make a difference. And these are the 12 that I've come up with: courage, diligence, generosity, gratitude, honesty, humility. And by the way, I'm reading these out loud because we have a lot of people who will be tuning into this just with the audio version. And I'm sorry, folks, about that you can't see this list, but industry, integrity, perseverance, resourcefulness, respect, and vigor. Now, I think I could actually go down through that whole list and see things about you that are, representations and good examples of those kind of traits. But I want to just pull out two or three, and if I don't want to embarrass you,
Yeah.
but just keep in mind the whole world's not watching this right now.
Good,
So,
good, good.
but I am amazed at your diligence. Folks, I happen to be on a university board with Hugo. He's a chair of one of the committees. When we have Zoom calls and committee meetings, one of the things I'm so impressed with is how thorough his reports, his summaries of those meetings are, and then how he follows through with tasks and helping people to kind of keep up with their tasks and everything. But the thing that's so impressive is he's doing this while he's going to Asia or in England or doing a shoot somewhere, doing a commercial, and it just is phenomenal. Most people, honestly, most people would do the least amount that they had to just to get it done because of all the things that they've got to do. But when you turn out what you turn out, it just shows you have really put yourself into it with your full attention. That's one thing. I won't belabor this. I just want to say a couple more. Generosity. For a variety of reasons, I've just watched the way that you are so generous with people, not only in, but yes, in even financial kind of giving, or where you're actually just giving people gifts and so forth, but in the spirit of generosity toward people, where you have an attitude or a spirit of just embracing people and not letting their weaknesses or flaws kind of get in the way of the warmth in your life. And so, those are two really significant ones. And of course, the word industry is just kind of you. I mean, you just are. And some people these days especially talk about workaholism. And I understand that there's a negative side to that, but we've been designed to do things and get things done that matter. And that's what I see you doing. I mean, perseverance, respect. Let me just close on that one. I have a definition for respect that goes this way: believing in and looking for the value of every person and then treating them accordingly. You live that way. So, sorry to put you through this little bit of
No,
embarrassment.
I'm honored, Doug, that you would see me in those ways, and I'm more thankful that that God at work in me is allowing those traits to be seen. So, I as I reviewed the virtues that you have been doing in this work, um, I was struck by a lot of those too, and I spent a lot of time just contemplating how the kind of work that I do to make sure that I can be that kind of person authentically and
Yeah,
not just because I'm looking for an accolade of some sort. So it is a bit embarrassing to
yeah.
have someone else tell you that. But I want to choose to feel more honored that God is reflected in me in that way. So thank you.
Well, there you go. We can check off the humility one too. Well,
But if I can speak a little bit on that,
yeah,
part of the reason that those virtues resonate with me is um, the life that I've had and the upbringing that I've had and the models that I've had. I am a first generation Latino here in the U.S. I was raised by a divorced mother. We came out of an abusive situation. And we're a family that's second or third generation pastoral. My grandfather, my great grandfather, all in the church, pastors, preachers, and people of God. And so from my earliest conceptions of life, I've been modeled in front of me by these men and these women in my life, the importance of being all that God has created you to being available, to being willing to do the work that's been set in front of you, and being willing to use the gifting that God has given to
hmm
impact the world and the people around us. So I'm thankful that, my grandfather, particularly, I think of, set that pattern. He died when I was like 7 years old, but already made such a deep impact in my
hmm.
life.
Hmm.
And then the perseverance that I learned from my mother as a single mother ever since I was like 13 years old when my parents got divorced, um, just really has shaped the person that I am today.
Do you think you were conscious of that shaping as it's happening? I mean, as a kid, were you actually semi-conscious of going, I really I really love the way my mom lives, or I really, that kind of thing.
Interestingly enough, I'm the kind of person that's been very conscious of my persona at all times. I think part of that contributes to my outward personality. I'm a self confident person, but I'm self confident with effort.
Hmm.
I'm very aware of what it takes to be self confident and the tools that it takes to build that. And so I've drawn actively from those around me to learn and to grow and to try to actively model and shape the person that I hope to be on an ongoing basis. So I would say, yes, I was very aware of all these different role models and people that I've seen throughout my life.
Have you have you found that you're also able? I don't know. A lot of people, I maybe don't try to do this, but are you able to, even through reading or watching? So it's somebody you don't even know, somebody's not even close to you, but you glean from them some things that are influential character wise.
100%. I feel like that part of my brain and I don't know, maybe my spirit is always actively seeking and absorbing and trying to learn and evolve because of that. So I read quite a lot. I read from all sorts of sources, and I try to glean little elements of character of approaches to life that I can shape. And I'm a very avid people watching person.
Hmm.
I love to sit in the groups of people that I'm in and observe how people interact and the words that they choose and the mannerisms that they do, even as small as do they are they touchy? Do they give you hugs? Do they are they more standoffish? All those little things I take in and I observe and I use them to help shape the kind of person I want to be.
That's wonderful. So, um, those are the influences, uh, that's that's come to bear on your own character, your own person, and everything. Right now, as you kind of look forward, someone like you, I'm sure you're thinking 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road about the kind of person that you still want to be. I mean, I know, I'm hitting 70 in just a couple of weeks, and I've always done this, but even more and more now, I'm thinking very, very regularly about, okay, I still want to be a certain kind of person, and I want to feel like I'm still progressing and improving as a person. Kind of what's on the horizon for you in terms of personal goals, or, the kind of things that you're pursuing?
Yeah, as a storyteller, I've spent a lot of time this year thinking about the arc of my personal story. And I've looked at it like in three waves or three movements or three parts of the story. In my first phase of my adult story, my 20s and my 30s, I was shaping, I was becoming who I needed to be. I was having experiences, I was being molded. In the second act, which is where I'm at right now, in that middle portion, 40s and 50s, it's kind of honing and refining.
Hmm.
And then in my last chapter, my last act, which it starts in the 60s and it goes however long God would have me, it's really then allowing that to have as deep of an impact. So I think a lot about that. I think a lot about legacy. And I think a lot about how I want people to talk about me when I'm gone, not because of a prideful thing, but I want
Oh,
to be the kind of person that people say, this man was honoring to God and used what God gave him to the best.
yeah.
I think often of D.L. Moody had a quote that said, the world has yet to see what God can do with a man wholly devoted to him. And by God's will, I aim to be that man. And that's kind of been like a motivating statement for me in my whole life. It's the kind of person I want to be where I'm actively at work, shaping, refining, and impacting those around me as I'm letting God be at work at me fully.
Yeah, I love that. One of the short little videos that we have at one of the courses that we do is actually write your own eulogy. And the idea is, go ahead now and write what it is you hope somebody would say at your funeral, but then ask the question, so how do I need to be living now in order for that to happen. So there's a sense in which we are writing our own eulogy, and I think that's neat. Hopefully, you're using the literary concept here. In literature, you also have when the plot is being resolved, you have what's called the denouement, and that's where everything kind of goes down into
Yeah, yeah.
the end. And I'm hoping that there's not a denouement during the third part of my life.
For you and me both, I think I try to also be an active person who's living in the now. Um, One of the things as I look back at my life, I've had a very fulfilled life in my career. God has opened a lot of doors. Personally, I'm a single man still. That was never my intention. And so I've had to wrestle with what does that
Hmm.
mean for my life and how do I act as a result of that? And one option that we are told all the time by society is just keep waiting, your moments will come.
Hmm.
But I have chosen to live opposite to that. I want to live in the here and now, actively, very engaged. I want to have deep and meaningful relationships. I want those that love me and that I love to know that I love them. I want to be in the now
Yeah.
because I know God's going to take care of the later. So I'm not waiting for that later. I'm living in the now so that God can say, I gave you little and you did a lot with the life that I've given you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hey, we've been talking a lot of kind of God references here. Um, I think probably most of the people who are watching these videos and also the At the Intersection podcasts that I do weekly, probably most of them because of the network at the early stages of this podcast, probably because the network of my life is largely among people of faith, particularly Christian people and everything. But I am trying to keep tuned into the world and how all of this talk about character can find a place of connection with a world and people in the world who don't have this prior faith commitment, particularly a Christian commitment like you and I have. Uh, I want to kind of shift our talk now towards sort of the, where are we going to land with this conversation? And because I am wanting to ask you, what kind of character issues are particularly, in your mind, crucial for this day and age. But I'd like to color it with, for anybody, and maybe even thinking about so the person, because I know you and I know where I'm coming from. We are not saying you need to be a Christian or else we don't have a relationship with you or we don't really connect with you. No, it's not that way at all. So how would you encourage a person to pursue a life of character without kind of saying, but now the only way this is going to happen is if you are a person of a Christian commitment?
Sure. I think that's a good question to contemplate. The majority of my life is spent in the mainstream world. I don't work at a Christian institution. I don't do any of that. I work in the mainstream world with people of all sorts of backgrounds, opportunities, upbringings, beliefs of all sorts. I still have found within that context that having strong values and foundation might happen to be anchored in a Christian faith it's a very valuable thing and a very impactful thing in the world around us. Because what I have seen that has been most necessary in today's world is to be a person of integrity,
Hmm.
to be a person of your yes being your yes, your no being your no, to be a person that is concerned with how they're contributing and not necessarily on taking someone else down.
Hmm.
So I think those kinds of values, those kinds of characteristics of humanity are what will allow anyone to be successful, to have opportunity, to have joy. I can't tell you how often in my current work experience I have conversations with people that are just amazed that I like to work just because I want to do the best that I can do within what my work is. I'm not looking necessarily for an accolade. I'm not looking for a pat on the back or to step over someone. I just I feel very honored that I can have the work that I have,
Hmm.
and I want to do the best that I can because I want to be again remembered as someone who gave it their all and did the best that they could, and that cared about the people around them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned integrity. I was wanting to keep the list short so that I wasn't embarrassing you too long, but actually, as I was hitting the word industry and the next word was integrity, something was there in me to want to say, that's who you are. You really do live that life. And I've watched that particularly in the area of your desire for our culture, our society, the workplace to be a place of diversity. And
Yeah.
you have integrity in the way that you advocate for that. And it's a powerful, for me, that's been something that's been very influential, very attractive in that character sense in your life, because I think that's, you know, not to pontificate, but I don't know how we can have bridges built between people without integrity in the way that we relate to people.
I would fully agree with you. And again, thank you for noticing that and how I'm trying to live my life. At the end of the day, if we don't relate well to each other, what's really the point of living in this life? Um, so as I work to live my life, I try really hard to keep people first in my mind. And I'll be very honest with you, Doug, it's the hardest thing to do is to
Mm,
live a life of integrity because in today's day and age, it's so easy to take a shortcut. It's
mm,
so easy to be perceived however you want to be perceived. It's harder to be transparent, to acknowledge when you don't know, when you're struggling, when you don't have the tools that are necessary to be engaged in that circumstance. But I find that it's always possible to say, you matter to me, whoever that person is in that
yeah,
circumstance, and
yeah,
let's figure this out together.
yeah. That's excellent. Well, as we kind of wrap things up, I mean, I can. This is so exciting and encouraging to me because my biggest hope about doing these interviews is that it'll be like the conversation itself will just be sprinkling all along the way little things that people can pick up about character and its importance and how that looks in a person's life. But to kind of draw it to a very particular focused close, I thought, you know, if you were to if you had if you had your elevator speech about character to some younger person and you wanted to tell them, one or two things. Hey, as you head out into your life, as you head out into your career in this culture, or you're heading out into marriage or family or something like that. I mean, it's such an unfair question to say boil it down to one or two things. But maybe even asking, so what else would you want to say to somebody that we could just end on, because you've got credibility now, really. People are watching you, they're hearing what you're saying, and they're going, I need to listen to this guy. So what would you
Hmm.
say?
Um, I think if I were to boil down some advice, and I would say not only to the young person, I would say to the older person, to
Yeah,
anyone,
right.
what's worked for me is this idea of being willing.
Hmm.
And not only in a workplace where certainly that matters, be willing to learn, be willing to try, be willing to be exposed, but be willing in your relationships, be
Hmm.
willing to listen, be willing to be exposed to someone else's point of view or their way of life, be willing to go through a little bit of discomfort as you're figuring out what's the best way forward. It's something that I remind myself all the time: be willing. I don't know it all. I don't have all the solutions, but when I'm willing, 9 times out of 10, I come out on the other side a better person because of that. So I would say be willing as
Hmm.
you live your life.
Well, thanks again. I know you had to carve out some time in a very busy life, and you've given me and the listeners and viewers a gift by being here today. I'd like to just bless you really quickly, as long as we are fellow Christians. Lord,
Please.
I just thank you so much for this time. I thank you for Hugo and for the places that you have taken him and the places still to come, the story that's still being written. And I pray as he's in this second act of his life, that third act will really continue to be and become that legacy, leaving that episode of his life that really brings everything together, and he has the greatest impact. So thank you for him, and I pray that as people listen to this podcast interview, that people will be attracted not just to Hugo, but to the things that he represents, of the kind of character that we can have. And I pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Hugo. All right, I'm gonna close out the time here. I really do appreciate your time. Let me turn off the recording. Oh, wow. Wasn't that fantastic? I mean, there were so many takeaways in that conversation, weren't there? And if you'd like to say thanks to Hugo for taking his time, or have any other thoughts, just leave comments. Now you know what August month is all about, these 5 weeks in August of 2023. So I hope that you'll tune in next week as we have another opportunity to have an amazing conversation with somebody about their lives and character. And until then, why don't you keep looking out for people worth admiring for the sake of your character and for the world around you? We'll see you then.